Hello, everyone, and welcome to this light review conversation with Dan Griffiths. Who, if you've not caught any of the ones that we've done to date, then you've got a treat coming up. Um, this one, we're going to be talking about TM65. Now, the previous two, we were talking about TM66, which of course is the one that everyone has been and is still talking about. Uh, Dan and I last week were both at a circular lighting conference organised by our good friends at Ricolite. TM66 was sort of front and centre in that, even though, Dan, as we heard, at some point the industry is going to have to grow up and get a bit more muscular in the way that it reports on its circular economy credentials. TM66, I think, will always be there, even if it's just as an in-house check before you go out and you engage with a third party, the third party organisation. Now you're doing all your stuff yourself. Can you see that happening? That shift to an outside assessor?
Yeah, so for us, obviously, we've gone with the LIA for that third party assessment, but I think it's critical. Truthfully, I can see why the industry want it. I can see as these things develop more, you've got to come away from marking your own homework as such. I think we saw discrepancies in some people's scores already where someone claims excellent circularity and you look at it going, that's not certified because, as we all do in the industry, I know where that comes from. I know where you get that. I know what that is. I know that lens. So I think it's needed. And I think, as the industry develops, it's the most talked about thing. Like you said, I think what we're talking about today is going to be the forgotten brother,
Yeah.
but very important. But TM66, I think, will carry on, but there will be more to come. I
Sure.
think we can see
Sure.
that. It's a great stepping stone to thinking about these processes.
There was an interesting comment. This is getting onto IP6, IP, stupid man, onto TM65 now. That's just too easy to do, isn't it? I just want to
That's
talk
it.
about exterior light fittings, please.
I'm in.
It was it was the comment that says, of course, we all care about carbon today, and hence TM65 is a vital part. And as we shift towards more renewable sources of generation, the carbon side of things will start to fall away. And I thought, oh, that's very wise. That's very sound. It occurred to me that actually something else will happen. For sure, the issue of we've got a government that might like to argue with us as to whether we're ever going to get to zero carbon now. But as carbon falls away and more renewable energy comes in, the thing that occurs to me that whilst we may not be talking about carbon, we will still be having to talk about electricity generation. And it might be that TM65 has to shift to be talking about how are you generating this stuff and what capacity are you calling for on the system. There's a thing in the newspapers today about the miles and miles and miles of pylons that are going to be required to get from offshore generation inland. And of course, it's a big scary article because you think you don't like windmills. Wait till all those pylons come back across our green and pleasant land. The feeling is that this idea of how the stuff is being generated, where it's coming from, yes, carbon today, but not necessarily carbon tomorrow. But again, it's something that might shift, but will not go away. And at that point, I'm going to shut up and say, can you tell everybody what TM65 is about?
No problem. I think that's a good point though, John, and I think that's where TM65 really for us is that entrance point into looking at your product, where we've talked about with TM66, where we're looking at the circularity of a product, the reusability perhaps. TM65 is really capturing the embodied carbon involved in making that product currently today. Like you said, in the future that could be adapted for different energy sources, and that could be important. But I think initially for us, we're looking at, in the industry, we know or companies should know their operational carbon. How much how much carbon am I using to make this? How much to run my businesses, my factories, everything else. But what we've never really captured before is, okay, to make this one product, how much carbon are we embodying just to make that fitting? And then it is helping us look at that product in a little bit more detail. Of sometimes it's a trip down a rabbit hole, I would say, on how far back you want to go. I think as a company, I've got 41 TM65 assessments. You can tell in my voice how I feel about that. The other ones, I'm like, yeah, I've done 41. This is a lot more complicated, but very worthwhile to get a score now. So what we have to do is we will fill out forms and look at all our materials that are involved in to make that product and where they come from. And that's how we will get a carbon, embodied carbon score. Now, it's how far back you want to go with that, I think, is the important thing that always needs clarifying. Now, one of the highlights, John, just where we mentioned circular light and live, and one of the main points that was put forward is it shouldn't be a point scoring exercise. And there are some mitigations to that I do agree with as well. It's really for a business to kind of get to grips of what you're actually using and can you make that product better, not trying to compare one product to another, because obviously the weight of a product has a massive effect on the amount of carbon. And I have two good examples of that. And I think what we found as an industry is trying to explain embodied carbon to people is very difficult. And I don't think people will mind me saying this. But one thing that I did when I started to present this to our company, so to the Tamlite board, of trying to explain what we're trying to do, is I related it to the amount of carbon or methane, if you like, that cows produce in a year. Because at least it's a relative metric that people can understand. So I was talking about it in cows. But people can understand that then. You go, okay. So like one product, it was the equivalent of 1 cow a year. And people go, wow, well, I know that, I know how much that is, because otherwise, if I give you just a value, 80 kilogram CO2 equivalent, people go, what's that mean? But it's a fascinating journey, and that's one of the things we had to explain to people. Why I say about the point scoring, John, you know our Circa fitting. That was a big. Well, it was a carbon project as well, so it was a whole circularity project, really, of, okay, let's make a product within 30-mile radius. Let's keep all these things where we can. Okay, the driver would have come, it was from Austria, but that, you can't really help that with drivers, but everything else, let's keep as much as we can in our control, and that will come up, and this is where I've had to explain, but that will have a higher carbon impact than a smaller fitting, because obviously it's a smaller fitting. So the weight of everything is different. But that's a great assessment of where you look at that, and then when you look back and you make assumptions on where things might come from, and then when you get back to it, and I made a map where I was actually looking where a lot of raw materials were coming from, and I can think a product is pretty good, and then I look back and I've got something coming from Mexico, something coming from Uganda, something coming from Philippines, something coming from China, something coming from Korea, and then all of a sudden you're looking at your total embodied carbon and what you thought was a circular fit-in, going, I need to do this better. I need to look at supply chain better, and that's what TM65 brings you, I think.
Okay. That seems to be to drive into beyond the carbon question into the local agenda. As well. I mean, we're seeing that in writ large, I suppose, in policies that are coming out of the United States now, where they're trying to bring so much of their production in house. It's a damn big house. If you're looking at the continental United States, it's a lot bigger than what we've got, and that the resources are much greater. But that does seem to be the issue of, well, what are we saying? If there is no alternative to having to go to Southeast Asia for equipment, then when we start looking at sort of mean figures, what should we be aiming for? Then we're still obliged to stay with that. And unless we can find somebody who can bring their drivers in on a sailboat instead
Yeah.
of using diesel, and all of that.
Hmm.
That's the world that we're going to be in, isn't it? Or is
Yeah, and
it? Is there a backdoor way into this?
I know, I think
Do
you're
you think?
spot on, John. I think that's some of the things that and the challenges that we've found as, as a not just as an industry, but as a manufacturer. People can be ignorant to it. If your one-step supply chain, generally speaking, as an industry. I know my steel comes from this steel company in Wales, so I am very circular. It's all, it's the UK. And we've all been ignorant of that because that's how far we go. And I think the
Mm.
biggest challenge with CM65 sometimes is getting, and this is a stepping stone to an EPD. We know the complexities around them. That's even more. But it's really trying to get to the root of where is some of this coming from? What I use, and I knew I used a plastic manufacturer 30 miles away. Okay, well, where's that plastic coming from? Where the
Yeah.
polymers coming from? Where is, and I think that element of things of having that as a discussion point is very, very different to what we've ever done before from a product development or a technical side. From a technical side, I want my technical data, I want all my safety certificates, I want all your, Roche, Reed. So like that's the important bits to me. From a product side, I want to know, is it recycled material? Is it this? You know, what's the benefits of this product? What's the efficiency of this diffuser? The question's never been, okay, well, where does that come from? Where does it originate? What's the embodied carbon of that product? So that I think is what we get with TM65 is it's changing the narrative slightly for us as we're looking at new products. It's hard to work backwards, which is what all
Mm.
companies trying to do. When you're looking over legacy products that you might have had in 5-6 years, but the truth is the embodied carbon needs to reduce. Operational carbon will reduce, as you said, with the advent of renewables and everything else, and everyone's trying to make everything more efficient. That's what the industry does. But if we go back 10 years, and this is anecdotal and no statistic to it, so please don't hold me to this. If we go back 10, 15 years to the fluorescent age, most people manufactured stuff with, ourselves. UK steel, here's your product. We made a reflector down the road. We knew where the reflector material come from because there was only a few. That it was a smaller group of an industry making these products.
Mm.
With the advent of LED, the emergence of the Far East and other manufacturing sources, particularly that kind of got scattergunned to everywhere
Yeah.
and anywhere. We never had to think about where microcapacitors come from before. And we have an electronics division, and I can tell you some of the challenges there is, we get 96-week lead times.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
you've got to
So,
build that in where she didn't have that before.
yeah. Also, I mean, on that, there's. I mean, we know about steel, we know about aluminium, we know about glass, I suppose. But again, we were talking about plastics last week, and not okay. And I think we'll all support the idea of being able to use plastic, reuse plastic that's already there, of which
Mm-hmm.
there is an enormous amount. But that, if you like, that's the sexy part of it. But I'm wondering, in terms of the carbon cost, in terms of how that plastic is brought into reuse, the actual
Mm-hmm.
chemical processes or the mechanical processes of creating the requirements for 3D printing, for example. And everyone go, oh,
Yeah.
3D printing, that's absolutely great. But
Yeah.
behind that, what the big power station that's
What's the
behind all of that
scale?
in order to make that work. So there might be
Yeah.
some awkward questions that need to be asked of some of the innovative things which at first sight sound good, but is going to turn you into just a grumpy man. Oh, yeah, there's no point talking to Dan because he'll tell you it's too expensive. It's using too much carbon. Well,
Yeah.
that's because it's using too much carbon.
Oh, I think you're spot on, John, with that. I think obviously we all know greenwashing and everything else, and it's very fancy to use buzzwords. And we 3D print backlight blockers because I don't like like on our exterior products. I don't like the look of the big old horrible baffles, so I can just make it on the lens. And some of the things we talk about when we're doing it, if it's low volume, is you know it's carbon offset compared to having a big tool made injection molded, but there is that economy of scale to that, and that's some of the bits that aren't captured. And as you mentioned, it's a lot of the things we come up with or look at now. We probably have to look at it a bit more and go, well, okay, am I better with this? But if that can't use X, Y, Z in the future, if that's not going to be more suitable for a renewable energy or renewable source, or that could change here, whether that's economically, politically, carbon. Product design is changing so much as things are progressing so fast, and I think everyone, every day, even for me at the event last week, you're still always learning something new. You think you've cracked it, and then someone asks you a question, and you go, bioplastics is a big one at the moment, and you sit there and you go, oh, I don't know. I thought I'd done X, Y, Z, but then you go, well, I don't know if it is that. Okay, right, let's go back and look at that. It's challenging.
It is, and I think quite a few of the things that are put in front of us are interim moves. Using recycled anything assumes that you've got a base stock going forward. Whereas it should be the case that if there's waste material out there, eventually there won't be any more waste material because you'll have used it all. It will no longer be in a waste stream. So, and bioplastics sound okay, but they've got to come from somewhere. And to what to what extent are those things scalable? So we think that TM65 carbon capture is just, as you say, it's a bit of a pain to have to do, but when you actually start digging, this something when I back in the day when I started in industry, and I was working as an electrical engineer over in Walsall, down the road from you. One of the things that I was involved in was conversations with local industry about their electrical demand, and this was about maximum demand, how much they were actually drawing off the system. That's kind of, it's still out there, but it's kind of starting to disappear because we think that we're using less energy now than we've used before, and it becomes less important. But again, I come back to that switch that when we go to as we move towards a renewables situation, then the whole question of yes, but how much electricity do you want, which comes back to that calculation that you're having to make as to basically how much electricity does Tamlite need to function, and can you change your processes not only in terms of looking at a more effective carbon neutral, whatever that might be, but also just simply in terms of limiting the draw on what will be a more restrictive electricity generation, which our generation does not know this, and we live in the wrong part of the world to talk about have we got enough electricity. But there's plenty of people in the world who say, I'd like some electricity, please.
Yeah, that's right.
So I guess this thing for you is going to run and run.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. I think it's going to adapt, and it's going to constantly evolve to suit ultimately the biggest issue on, I don't want to get into a big political global thing, but consumerism is a big problem. Problem is we won't change our habits. You make everything from wood, like you said, there's not enough wood to be sustainable. You make everything from bioplastic, there's not enough. You use recycled material, which is fantastic, but there's not enough recycled material for economies of scale. So everything we're doing is just, I think the reality is everything we do, we've just got to do a bit better, a bit more efficient, and a bit more responsible. And then, unfortunately, we're on this journey. Just, every 5 years there's going to be, something new. I remember when I was at school, it was all about not using paper, rainforests. And then that was the big change to plastics. And everyone's kind of gone, oh, we didn't quite get that right. But then the answer is not to go back to paper and wood, because in 5 years' time, we're going to be talking about the same things again. It's finding ways to be more efficient and more socially responsible with what we are manufacturing. And you're right, with the grid, that's going to come a point where everyone is going to look at, again, of business efficiencies and what is the most efficient way, to use that energy. We will not have, although we have an abundance of electricity, you know, we know that some of the challenge with electric cars. Now,
Yeah.
if that's got to start coming onto grids, well, then does that mean manufacturers get their electricity limited? I don't know. And unfortunately, I've got another 30 years probably in this industry, so that's going to be I'll be along that
Well,
ride.
are we gonna we're gonna book a return call in 30 years? Are we?
That's it. I'll do it.
I'll get onto the cryogenics guy and see if they're busy.
Yeah,
But
that's
no,
it.
I think there's a couple of ways of looking at this. One is I don't really want to think about it, and therefore I'm just going to stick my head in the sand inevitably. And the other one is it's going to happen. It is going to happen. So we might as well enjoy it on the journey, right? You know, because there's no point in just moaning about how good it used to be. Because let's remember, it wasn't. It was just possibly easier because we didn't know to care, and now we know to care. It makes it a bit tougher. Doesn't mean to say we shouldn't have some smiles and fun along the way.
Yeah, true, definitely. And I think with TM65, look, I'm not going to say it's not, you know, getting the data is challenging, but people are asking for it because people want it. So,
Yeah.
you know, for people, whether they like it or not, they're going to have to get on board wherever you're making your products. You know, if you're sourcing, if you're buying, people are asking for embodied carbon scores. So you're going to have to do it.
And let's leave it at that, guys.
Go.
You're gonna have to do it. So let's just crack on. Dan, thank you very much for that one. As ever, lots and lots to think about. And we'll see what happens next. Thanks for your time, everybody. See you again soon.